What's up, folks? Gil Narvaez with Fortitude Consulting, and we are here to discuss one-handed shooting. One-handed shooting is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. If you have ever trained with me, I know that you have heard me preach the mantra of one-handed shooting being very important to your own personal development. It is a tool that I've used over the last few years to really maximize the amount of performance that I can get out of my freestyle by understanding what needs to happen to put good, sustainable structure on the gun one-handed as well. So let's talk about how we go about doing that and how we go about evaluating whether or not what we're doing is actually as effective as we think it is. In order to do that, let's go in reverse and look at a few things that I used to do in the past that wasn't necessarily wrong, but it wasn't the most efficient way of doing it either, right? What is that thing that I'm talking about? What that thing that I'm talking about is the idea of the natural cant, bringing the gun up one-handed, locking the elbow completely out, and actually angling the gun offline, if you will, in order to, or with the goal of mitigating recoil by having that natural cant, having the optic in front of the dominant eye and locking the elbow out so that we are putting as much structure behind the gun as possible to mitigate recoil as much as possible. Well, here's why that is not the most efficient way of doing this thing. When we do that, what we have a tendency of seeing is the gun will actually reciprocate in a very unusual manner, a manner which we are not used to seeing, right? We have a definitive recoil impulse. Typically, it's going to be a vertical recoil impulse as long as we are keeping good pressures on the gun. That gun is going to recoil in a vertical manner. The moment we put that natural cant on it, we're going to see a tendency of the gun recoil impulse going to the inside of the body. This being the outside, this being the inside. So the gun will definitively come up and off to the left as a right-handed shooter, up and off to the right as a left-handed shooter. Let's see what that looks like in live fire. All right, so you saw the gun definitively traveling up and to the inside, up and to the inside with that natural cant. Oftentimes when that occurs and people are kind of exploring this and they think to themselves, well, why are we changing things shooting one-handed? Why not just come up with a freestyle grip and then release and let go of the support side hand and keep the gun exactly the way it is? Well, this is somewhat of an improvement, but what we're still going to see is a slight upward and inward recoil impulse. It will not be as drastic as it will with the natural cant, but there would definitively be a recoil impulse going up and to the left, which is not what we're used to seeing in freestyle. Where is that coming from? That's coming from the energy leakage. What is the energy leakage? Why is the energy leakage coming up and off to the left? It definitively has to do with your arm and your elbow. You can see that my elbow is not in line with the gun, so since it's kicked out to the outside, well, that energy is going to push off to the inside when the gun begins to recoil. There are a couple of things that we need to do in order to get good structure into the gun, good sustainable structure in and on the gun to be able to shoot one-handed in the most efficient manner possible. The first thing that we need to do is we need to get that elbow in line with the actual firearm. So we take that elbow and we dig that elbow in so that the arm is in line with the gun. So the elbow is the first key to this thing, right? We want to get that elbow and that arm dug in and in line with the actual gun. What's the other key? The other key are the pressures that we're applying on the gun itself. What I'm doing is with my right hand, the hand that's on the gun, I'm taking my thumb and I'm actually driving that thumb up and in to the frame, the top portion of the frame of the firearm. I'm definitively driving that pressure in. You can see what happens to the firearm when I take my thumb and I drive my pressure into the top side of the frame and almost into the back side of the slide, if you will. What's happening is this top portion of the gun is being pushed into my hand, and the bottom portion, you can actually see when I push the thumb in, the bottom portion actually kicks out, okay? The other thing that I'm doing to mitigate that kicking out of the bottom of the frame is I'm taking my ring and my pinky finger and I'm applying pressure. This pressure is not going towards the front strap of the gun. We're not applying pressure this way. What we're doing is we're hooking around and we're actually applying pressure in to the side of the frame, right down here at the bottom. The best leverage point that we have available is we hook those fingers around, and I'm actually, without applying thumb pressure, I'm applying pressure to the gun just like this. You can see that that pulls the gun, it adds that counter pressure and pulls the top side of the gun away from my hand. So what we're gonna do in order to have that pressure and counter pressure and lock the gun in place is we are going to apply both of those at the same time. And when we apply both of those at the same time, it keeps the gun very, very steady in that hand. And we are using leverage to the side of the frame and leverage to the side of the frame down on the bottom. On the top, on the bottom, we're using leverage. I'm not using strength. I'm not trying to muscle the gun. I'm not trying to beer can crush it and hold on to it, because we know what is going to fatigue first, strength or leverage. Hands down, strength is going to fatigue first, everything else being equal. Leverage, if you can place leverage on the gun, leverage is going to be far more sustainable. So we're utilizing that lock in place with leverage for the gun to stay in place. Now, one of the things that I like to think about here is as I am applying those pressures and I'm digging my elbow to get into the position, is I almost want to think of my dominant side wrist torquing into the gun. In other words, we are torquing into the gun in a rotational manner. What I call that is the negative cant. This is the natural cant that people have utilized for years and years and years. This is the negative cant, where we're actually driving the gun and almost attempting to push it out in the opposite angle, right? What that does is that induces the feeling of applying those pressures with the thumb and with the pinky and the ring finger, and it also induces driving that elbow in and getting that arm in behind the gun and getting a lot of really, really good structure on the gun. Why do I want to go into a negative cant if I can? Well, the way the body works is if you give your body an inch, it'll take a mile, right? So if we start with the gun completely vertical, you can already see my elbow is not completely in line with the gun, even if I have my elbow in line with the gun. And we start with the gun just vertical. Well, about the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th round in that string, you'll notice that my elbow and my arm kind of sneak out, and we get to a point where now the gun starts acting a little bit differently, right? That's your body taking that mile that you've given. You gave it an inch, now it's that your body's actually taking that mile. So you want to compensate for that if you can up front and put yourself into this position here, so that even after the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round, even if we start going a little bit vertical, we're still in a really, really good, solid position, rather than starting here and drifting over into that no man's land, if you will, right? That area where you're not going to have nearly as much control. So that is the negative cant. That's how we set it up. What are a couple of things that we need to be concerned with or some things that we need to consider, rather. I want you to consider your stance. Believe it or not, your stance is going to matter here. Historically, I have always been of the opinion that you bring the gun up in freestyle, and if you want to go one-handed, you just take your support side hand off, bring it over to your chest, drop it down, whatever you do. But wherever the position of that gun was in freestyle, that's generally speaking where we're going to keep it when we're shooting one-handed. Here's the problem with that. You can already see my elbows offline of the gun. I'm already starting out in a bad position. Even if I put that negative cant and I put those good pressures on the gun, the elbow being offline of the gun is going to allow some leakage, and it's going to give me a little bit different recoil impulse, not the recoil impulse that I want. I want something that is as close to what I am going to see in freestyle as possible. How do we deal with that, right? One of the ways that we deal with that is just forcing and driving that elbow to get up underneath the gun. Well, the problem with standing in a traditional fighting stance is that will create an impingement in my shoulder, if you will. It's very, very uncomfortable, and it can even get painful in some instances as well. When I hit that elbow underneath the gun and I start impinging that shoulder, it does not feel good at all. How do we resolve that? We resolve that by actually switching our stances. Here's the reason why. If I keep my arm here in this position, you can see the amount of space that I have here. Now, when I go to a southpaw position, what that does is that draws that hip open on the support side, and that actually opens my chest up. Now I've got a lot more range of motion on this shoulder, and I can dig that, let's do this with a gun. I can dig that elbow in relatively easy. You can see how far I can get it over there, and I've got no discomfort whatsoever. This is a very, very comfortable position because I've opened my chest up and I've given myself a little bit more space for that shoulder to be able to rotate into position to get that negative cant. So that's why we want to pay attention to the stance and how our body mechanics are going to affect that performance. Let's take a look at what this looks like in live fire, both the negative cant versus, the natural cant versus actually digging into the negative cant position, and see if we can see the definitive differences in those two positions right here. Now that we've seen what that looks like in live fire, let's take a look at a real-world application of it, not just on the dominant side, but on both the dominant and the support hand side. This footage that I'm getting ready to throw up is actually footage from a classifier match that I shot just a few days ago out in Matthews, North Carolina. The classifier is one of my favorites, Riverdale Standards. Why is it one of my favorites? Because it incorporates a lot of great gun handling skills. It incorporates your freestyle shooting, it incorporates your shooting on your dominant side, and it incorporates shooting on the support hand side as well. You'll see me definitively get into that negative cant position on both sides, and you will see the way the gun actually reciprocates. That's not me muscling the gun in. That's not me hanging on to it and beer can crushing it and trying my best to keep it in place, because when we do that, we create a lot of unnecessary tension in the arm, and that in and of itself is going to make it more difficult to control the gun. We want to use leverage, and we want to put ourselves in the strongest position possible.
Shooter, are you ready? Yes, sir. Stand by. Are you ready? Stand by. Shooter, are you ready? Yes, sir. Stand by. 608.
608.
Are you ready? Stand by. You all finish unload the show clear? Oh. You're clear, hammer home. Time 374. Ready? Clear.
Talking fast.
You got 3 alpha and 2 charge.
3 alpha, 2 Charlie.
5 alpha.
5 alpha.
4 alpha delta.
4 alpha delta. 5 alpha. 5 alpha.
One thing that I forgot to mention, the idea of locking the elbow out with the hope that you're going to mitigate that recoil. It is very unrealistic to do that. We want to have a bend in the elbow, and that's one of the reasons why we get the bend in the elbow, and we actually drive that elbow up underneath and in line with the gun. With our elbow completely locked out, you can actually do this yourself. You don't even need another person, but when you lock your elbow completely out, try to press your own arm down, and you'll find that you cannot resist that very well at all. Get about a 1 to 2 inch bend in the elbow, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more. Now try to press your own arm down, and you'll notice that you are much, much stronger in that position with that elbow bent. That's another reason why we go to driving that elbow underneath the gun, in line with the gun, and hitting that negative cant. Negative cant will work on both sides. However, there are some things that you need to be mindful of. You'll notice I said earlier, when I'm doing this on my dominant side, everything is in line with the dominant eye, and I can get a negative cant very easily and still have the optic in line with my dominant side eye. That's very easy to do. Now, when I go over to the support hand side, if I do a negative cant in the support hand side, guess what gets exponentially more difficult? 2 things. Number 1, it gets exponentially more difficult to actually dig that elbow in and get it in line with the actual gun itself, and it's sorry, English is my second language today apparently. It's exponentially more difficult to get the optic in line with my dominant side eye because now we're cross-eye dominant. So you might have to give up a little bit of that structure with getting the elbow underneath, and you might have to start with the gun completely vertical in order to draw it over, bring the back plate of the gun over to the dominant side eye and get everything lined up. So while things won't be perfect on the support hand side, with the thought process or with taking the action of applying the correct pressures on the grip and getting that elbow in as close as we can to actually in line with the gun is going to get it very, very stable. It will be exponentially more stable than actually using the natural cant. I assure you of that. There are a couple of things that we need to be mindful of on the support hand side, especially as a right-handed shooter. When you look at the ejection port on most guns, it's going to be on the right-hand side. So if we are flagging that thumb in order to get the pressure, oftentimes what will happen is when the gun reciprocates, that thumb being directly in front of the actual ejection port will cause problems. It will cause a malfunction. Clearing a malfunction when you have the gun in your dominant hand, it can be somewhat problematic. Clearing it when you have it in your support side hand can be catastrophic, especially if you've got a task in front of you that you need to accomplish now. So don't make it more difficult on yourself. Make sure that you're being very mindful of where you place that thumb and don't have it flagged so high that you're actually going to induce a malfunction. What do I like to do with my support hand thumb? Well, I shoot a lot of 2011s, 1911s. This is my favorite platform, if you will. What I like to do is I like to ride the razor's edge of the actual safety on the support hand side, and I'm not driving pressure down. What I'm actually doing is I'm taking my thumb and I'm rolling it over and I'm trying to apply that pressure inward, right? I don't want to apply the pressure downward. I actually take my thumb and I roll it over and I apply that pressure inward on the actual safety. I'm doing that for two reasons. Number one, to get my thumb out of the way of the ejection port. And number two is to be mindful of the other thing that can go wrong when it comes to employing one-handed shooting on the support hand side, which is if you have a manual safety, inadvertently activating that safety. How does that happen? Typically, the activation of the safety happens in the transfer over from your dominant side to your support side. So you draw the gun, you actually disconnect the safety, and then as you're transferring over, you're trying to get your support side hand dug in as deep as you possibly can. And what we have a tendency of seeing is inadvertently activating that safety as you get your support side hand in there. Oftentimes people won't notice this immediately. They'll come up and they'll try to shoot the gun, and you'll see that it doesn't go off, and then they realize, oh, the safety got engaged somehow. Let me go ahead and disconnect it. Now, if you've got an ambi safety on it, fairly easy to do that. If you don't, then you have to come over and actually disengage the safety on the opposite side. Here's the other thing that you need to be mindful of is the support hand thumb riding under the safety in recoil. So if the gun is going off and I have my thumb either to the side or underneath it, as the gun's recoiling, oftentimes what will happen is we will inadvertently engage that safety, and then now we have to deal with that as well, right? So those are two things from the standpoint of doing this on your support hand side that you want to be mindful of, particularly if you are working with a manual safety. Those of you who are running striker fired firearms, or maybe you don't have a manual safety, maybe it's a double, single deal where you don't have a manual safety that you have to worry about. Obviously, it's one less thing that you have to be concerned with. But in this instance, we want to cover all of our bases just in case somebody's got that situation out there. So we saw the footage of us practicing this in live fire. We saw the footage of us actually applying this in an actual shooting solution situation in a match. It's very, very effective, very effective. It's something that I highly recommend you explore and play with. Getting really, really good at shooting when you are shooting freestyle, you're going to find that there is a ceiling there, right? There's absolutely a ceiling there. And then once you get thrown into a situation where you have to shoot one-handed, you're going to have one or two reactions. Either you've put the work in and it's nothing to worry about, you'll pick the gun up one-handed and do what you got to do, or you've already planted the seed in the back of your mind, excuse me, you've already planted the seed in the back of your mind by not putting the work in. You're planting that seed of doubt. When that moment comes and when you need to perform in that moment, you're going to pick that gun up one-handed and you're going to be hoping that you have a positive outcome rather than knowing what you do or what you need to do in order to have a positive outcome and solve that problem as soon as possible. That's all I've got for now on one-handed shooting. I hope you have found this helpful. I hope it's given you a path that you can work on this stuff on your own. I'm a huge believer in this from the standpoint of performance development, as well as being a professional firearms instructor or coach, or an armed professional. You got to work one-handed stuff. If you're not working one-handed stuff, you are literally setting a limit for yourself. And another thing that I like to say all the time is our limits are set by the amount of work you're willing to put in, or the amount of work you decided not to put in. So don't place arbitrary limits on yourself. Work this stuff, work it as far as you possibly can, and you will be absolutely amazed at what you yourself can accomplish with one-handed shooting. That's all I got for you. I'm going to sign off. I'm going to leave you with one last thought. Make sure that you are following that process. Train, prepare, prevail.